welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there on your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that Handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Thank you, Jess. And hello and welcome everyone to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's topic is Zero Touch IT, Understanding and Implementing. I want to start by saying a big thank you to everyone for being here today on the EcoCast. We've got some great companies who are doing so much good stuff in this space, and they include CyberArk and Scale Computing. Looking forward to getting going with that. Okay, for those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Keith Ward and a moderator here with Actual Tech Media. You've already been introduced to Jess, and our other great moderator is Scott Becker. All right, so in addition to the knowledge that you'll be gaining today, 3 of you will get a little something extra, as today we are giving away 3 $300 Amazon gift cards. Now, as just mentioned, you do have to be present for the entire event to be eligible to win one of the cards, and the terms and conditions, if you're into that kind of boring lawyer talk, can be found in the handouts section. All right. So let's get into it. Why don't we? We have got a great keynote today, and doing our keynote is a face that'll be familiar to many of you, David Davis, who is the co-founder of Actual Tech Media, as a matter of fact, and a moderator still with Actual Tech Media. Now, David's going to tell us more about Zero Touch, and I can't wait to get started. So thanks for being here, David.
All right, thanks so much for the introduction. Really appreciate that. I'm excited to be here today chatting with you about understanding and implementing Zero Touch IT. I mean, if you think about this, this is a big challenge for companies, all around the globe, and it ties in greatly with, security and efficiency for the future. You really want to be able to deliver a seamless user experience and automate all of your IT processes, and that's what Zero Touch IT is all about. So let's first start off with a definition. What is Zero Touch IT? Well, according to the internet, the official definition of Zero Touch IT is that it involves deploying systems and processes that require little to no manual intervention. So things are automated for tasks such as provisioning, configuration, updates, and maintenance, with the goal being to achieve higher levels of automation and reduce the need for human involvement. So human involvement, like system administrators, perhaps like yourself, or your end users, they have a lot better things to do than to worry about, how they're going to configure their new PC or get it set up. So let's talk about the benefits. And some of these apply to, you as an administrator, and some of these apply to your end users as well. So the first benefit being faster deployment. You can get new systems up and running, automated, configured properly with the best practices with your security configurations for hardening, new hardware, new software, up and rolling faster than ever. And that gets your end users to work faster than ever, and they're doing it securely. You've got reduced downtime because you have automated monitoring and self-healing, things like that, to proactively address issues before they happen. And then enhanced security because these systems are configured properly with your security, best practices. You're ensuring compliance, you're reducing vulnerabilities, preventing downtime, preventing ransomware. You also have efficiency gains so that your IT teams can focus on strategic tasks instead of routine maintenance, and they can focus on doing things that really give the business agility and create efficiency for the company instead of simply provisioning hardware and software. And all this leads to, of course, end user satisfaction. Automation creates a smoother end user experience. I don't know if you've ever worked at a company where you spend the first 2 weeks of your employment just trying to get everything set up, and it just feels like it takes so long when you really just want to get to work. So, what are the components that make up zero touch IT? Well, let's start off with orchestration. This is what you're going to use to automate the tasks and the workflows through your automated processes. You've got configuration management to help you automate the configuration of your devices, applications, and services. And then your provisioning. Of course, this is all automated setup and deployment of your new resources for your new users and projects. You've got monitoring and remediation. So you're monitoring your systems with self-healing. You've got patching and update management to keep everything secure and up to date. And finally, security and compliance, automated enforcement of security policies. And so these are the components that make up zero touch IT. What about the steps to implement zero touch IT? It breaks down to, performing an assessment, selecting technology, mapping out the processes, the workflows, the automation that needs to be created, testing that automation, those processes, then deploying, of course, gradually rolling it out, and then finally training your IT staff, and then making everything easy for your end users. So what are some tips for success? Well, of course, you want to start small. Begin with a pilot project, gain experience, build confidence. You want to collaborate, involve other IT teams and end users and stakeholders in this zero-touch IT journey. Then you need to, of course, continually improve, regularly assess, and refine your automated processes. And then you'll need some flexibility, of course, during the process. You need to adapt and evolve as your business processes and needs and technologies change. And then you want to measure your return on investment and your success, over time using key performance indicators or KPIs, monitor metrics. For example, a reduced downtime, faster, more efficient response time from your support group, most likely a reduced number of support calls because end users are being set up faster or they're calling in less. And you'll want to calculate your return on investment by comparing the time and the resources saved against the cost, of course, of implementing this kind of automation that we're talking about. In the end, zero-touch IT can help your organization to be more agile, more efficient, more resilient, and enable your teams in the IT organization to focus on strategic, money-making, difference-making initiatives for your company, and also help your end users to focus on doing their jobs better, faster, and more efficiently. And of course, along the way, you want to make sure that you leverage innovative solutions to help you implement zero-touch IT, because I can tell you it's not really possible simply using what you already have in place. Most likely, you're going to need some innovative solutions, just like the solutions that you'll be learning about on this event today. So I encourage you to stay tuned to the expert presentations coming up, because we've got some really cool solutions that are going to help you ensure success with your zero-touch IT implementation. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the event.
David, thanks for that excellent keynote. You laid everything out on what's involved for zero touch and why you should be doing it really quickly, and a lot covered in a brief time. Really good stuff to kind of set the table for our speakers today. And with that, we've got a poll question. We want to know how quickly you'll be implementing or updating your IT solutions. Is it right away? Is your time frame longer, on the order of maybe a year or a couple of years? Let us know in the window there. Take the poll and give us that feedback, which is really important for us and for our sponsors as well. I want to thank everyone who answered that poll. Going to leave it up just another minute or so. Got a lot of wide variety of the time frames here. So all of you are looking at at different, at different time frames, which of course is quite natural. All right, so poll has been up. You guys are voting, and it is time now to get going to the main event. I'm really excited to start the sessions, and our first presentation for this event in Zero Touch IT is from CyberArk. Now, presenting for CyberArk today is Matt Balderstone, Solution Strategy Architect. Matt, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me, more importantly?
Outstanding. I can hear you great. Welcome, Matt. It's our pleasure to have you here today. And right now, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Matt Balderstone. I've been a cybersecurity practitioner for most of my career. And for the last decade, I've been focused on endpoint security. 6 years of which I've been with CyberArk, where I am the global solution architect for endpoint. Today, what I'd like to share with you is some of the techniques to make EPM zero touch. But before we get going, let's do a knowledge level set and start with the most obvious question. What is EPM? Well, EPM, or Endpoint Privilege Manager, is a tool designed to achieve least privilege on endpoints. Let me just forward the slides on, sorry. So, So least privilege in the context of endpoints is the enforcement of the minimum level of rights for a user or application to function, no more, no less. It applies not only to users, but also applications. So some of the things that you might want to consider are, where did the application come from? Can it execute? What is it permitted to access? How is it launched? Is there an expected parent process? Does it spawn child processes? And under what context can they be elevated? That's quite a bit to get your head around, but it is a worthy methodology to adopt because it's a proactive method that's a completely different mindset to endpoint security, where we assume breach and we harden our systems to prevent them from being weaponized. And sorry, I forgot to forward my slides on again. There we go. Sorry, I'll get used to that, I promise. So it's often referred to as that common sense approach to security. You're going to harden the endpoints and you're going to mitigate threats before they happen. And that's completely different to what you would normally expect, where threats are detected and then you respond to those. So if we look at this from the context of the attack vectors that it mitigates, you'll start to see how effective it is. And it's undisputably the most effective method of defeating attacks. And it provides the foundation that other security controls build on. Oops, that's moved on one more slide than I wanted it to. I will come to that. Thank you, stay there. So if you choose any attack on an endpoint, you will find that the lack of controls in that in the area of least privilege are what allowed an attacker to disable security controls, transform the endpoint into their personal launchpad, and progress their attacks with devastating consequences. And it's for that reason that leading authorities, and it seems that the slide has moved on all by itself, consistently rank these critical controls as priorities. To the point it's become, one of the basics you need in place before you embark on any other security project. Now that makes sense because the effectiveness of those other security initiatives are only as good as the foundation that they're implemented on the top of. That's pretty compelling. And I've only touched on the surface of the benefits of least privilege. If you want to learn more on that, you'll find the ebook that we've included as a handout very informative. But the burning question is, if these are critical controls, why are they absent in the majority of organizations? Is it going to move on a slide? Click. There we go. So unfortunately, it's been historically difficult to operationalize, and its demands on resource can be extremely high. And depending on how it's implemented and the capabilities of the EPM product you choose, that problem could be much, much worse, which for some makes it the best advice you just can't take. If you compare that to the relative ease that detection technologies can be dropped in, it's understandable why some organizations are heavily invested in that area. in the hopes that enough layers of detection and user education will prevent attackers from reaching the soft underbellies of their endpoints, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. So, what's the secret to being successful with EPM without throwing huge amounts of manpower at the problem? And the simple answer is you need to adopt the existing ecosystem. Siloed solutions have limited effectiveness, and they naturally increase the workload with the multiple touch points that they require. So if we look at some common examples of day-to-day activities which can be streamlined, it'll become obvious why making it part of the ecosystem makes perfect sense. So application control is a big part of the effectiveness of EPM. If you only allow the applications that you trust to run, then by definition, everything else, including unknown malware, is blocked. That's very powerful. Because it's not reliant on detection, it's just as effective with zero-day threats as it is with known threats. To get there, though, you need to have allow listed all your apps, and that is no small feat, as the typical application landscape for most organizations is quite large and it grows every day. We have software distribution services to help keep up with that demand, but you now have additional steps to allow newly deployed or updated apps to run. Let's just quickly walk through that workflow. First, we need to package an app. Then we upload it into our software distribution and deploy it to our endpoints, or make it available to our end users to install on demand through self-service. However, that app is not usable yet, as application control would block its execution. The next steps are to gather matching criteria that allows us to securely identify the app, configure app control to allow the application to run, deploy policies to endpoints, and now the application can be used by the end users. That's a lot of steps for one app, and it doesn't scale well. A method I see quite often to reduce that workload is to make weaker application definitions so that one definition can be used to match whole swathes of apps. And that does reduce the workload, but that wildcard approach effectively neuters app control. And unknown and malicious apps that didn't come from software distribution are now able to execute without raising any alerts under the cover of darkness. CyberArk take a completely different approach to this by tracking applications from the source they came from, together with other characteristics and hallmarks of the deployed app that confirm its origin. So we can configure software distributors as trusted sources and automatically allow list anything that they deploy, but without losing sight of it, and that's an important one. Every application that EPM encounters is inventoried in its application catalog together with where it came from, where it's deployed, and which policies apply to it. It's already been packaged and approved for deployment, so why should you have to approve it in another solution? One decision, one outcome, zero touch. I promise that's as cheesy as I get today. And that example was easy, right? But let's move on to something a little bit more complicated. So not all user demands can be handled by your software distribution, and those user requests are typically going to land in your help desk ticketing system. A help desk operative will now review your request, and if approved, will need to assign the ticket to an EPM admin. That EPM admin now needs to find an appropriate matching criteria for the application or function that's been requested. They then need to configure policy and deploy it to the endpoint. To reduce the number of IT resources involved, what I typically see is that help desk operatives are given some form of basic training on building EPM policies, but obviously they don't have the experience and the background in that area. So the quality of those policies fluctuates wildly, and the weaknesses that get introduced that way are not discovered until an audit is conducted or an event like a breach occurs and someone's reverse engineering, how did we get here? What allowed this to run in the first place? We fixed this gap by utilizing the ticketing system's built-in workflows and EPM's open APIs so that we can we have a better way of handling those user requests. So upon approval, a workflow can be initiated to programmatically select the best matching criteria, ensuring consistently high quality application definitions, and that those definitions are then added to appropriate policies and deployed to endpoints. Again, similar to the last example, zero touch of the EPM admin console, you're just utilizing your existing workflows. Okay, but what if your ticketing system doesn't have that workflow system? I'm making the assumption there that not only have you got the capabilities with workflows for your ticketing systems, but that also you've got the expertise to code them, and that's not always the case. In those circumstances, you would then hand off that activity or that workflow to an automation engine. So in this example, I'm using Flows, which is a CyberArk codeless event or trigger-based automation platform that acts as middleware between anything that can be queried. So to begin this workflow, an event occurs, which could be the creation of a service ticket that's then categorized as EPM, or a user makes a request directly in EPM, or whatever workflow you've got for user requests this can adopt. Once that event has been processed, we can get Flows to do some due diligence. So number one, is the user part of any groups that aligns them with a particular role? That allows us to build policy that's targeted to the role versus an individual, which obviously is a much more scalable way of building policy. And it better supports the joiners, movers, leavers process so that you don't end up with privilege creep. If you've got employees that move around the business and do different roles at different times, you want the rights to be specific to the role that they're currently doing and not based upon some sort of snowball effect of they've been with us a long time and they seem to have the keys to every kingdom. So it's really good for that. Next, what was the justification chosen, and is this reasonable based on the application or task that they attempted to elevate? Next, we're going to consult threat intelligence services to check the reputation of the application and if there's known methods for that application to be weaponized so that you can even control applications that can be weaponized by attackers. And then finally, does the application adhere to our acceptable use policies? From here, we've got several options. We could simply update the service ticket with the findings of the due diligence and some appropriate options for the help desk operator, or we could streamline this even further by directing the request to their line manager or an appropriate approver via instant messaging such as Teams or Slack, and allow them to approve the request directly from the message. Once approved, Flows configures the appropriate policies and deploys it to the endpoints. The example I've used is for ticketing, but Flows can literally connect anything to anything. So in this workflow, new and emerging threats are analyzed by the Security Operations Center, or SOC, which they get from various sources such as threat intelligence exchanges. The next step is to ascertain the scope and impact of the threat to their endpoints. And EPM can help here, as all software on EPM managed endpoints is centrally cataloged. So if the threat was a particular Java version, you'd quickly be able to see if that exists in your estate, on which endpoints, and also importantly, who uses it. They now need to craft an application definition that matches the application they want to block, add that to policy, and then deploy it to the endpoints. That looks pretty simple. However, the likelihood that this is one person analyzing the threats and making the configuration changes in EPM is pretty rare. In reality, that will be the SOC making a request to the EPM admin team and waiting for a response. Meaning there's a time delay between receiving the intelligence and being able to act on it, which obviously significantly reduces its value. And I'm going to deviate from the diagram format I've used so far, as I want to point out that EPM can also be a source of threat intelligence. In this overview, we're still getting threats from our threat intelligence exchange, but we're also adding EPM as a source, as it can report on suspicious activity and attacks such as attempts to access unauthorized credential stores, which is typically activity by attackers looking to get a foothold and move laterally. The threats are then analyzed by the SOC, but the difference here is that they can respond directly. To query the app catalog and see the affected endpoints, update the blocked apps policy, including killing any instances that are currently running, and even executing remediation scripts on the endpoints to uninstall or update the app. And this can all be accomplished within the SIEM platform workflows or by using third-party automation such as CyberArk flows. The zero-touch capabilities we've looked at so far have made it easier than ever to adopt essential security controls that EPM provides. And the examples that I've shared, that we were not limited to those. These are just the common ones that I thought would resonate with you better. However, we're not stopping there. And our next push will be into AI-powered automated workflows in the areas of role profiling, app intelligence, and environment-specific policy recommendations. So with role profiling will help identify roles within your organization based on group memberships in your identity platform, comparison by industry, and the trends in application usage. So let me share a common example here where this would really help. With one of my customers, we were trying to define what the roles would be within their organization, and they suggested developers. That's quite a sweeping statement, and that they had several thousand of these developers. Over the course of quite a long engagement with them, we were able to determine actually within these groups of developers, there were subgroups, and we were able to then identify DB administrators, web administrators, coders, etc. And you really want to get to those lower levels of roles so that the users only have access to the tools and permissions that they need. They're not empowered with things that they don't. That's not keeping with least privilege. That took quite a while to do, and quite a lot of experts to be able to harvest that information. What our goal is that role profiling could be achieved with AI, and that simply observing activity within your user base and comparing that with other industries and any groupings that might be relevant there, it's able to then pull out roles that you can now start to build policies against. The next area is app intelligence, which will expand on reputation of apps to include weaponization of good apps, which is also known as living off the land. And then categorization of apps, such as development tools and productivity apps, which can be cross-referenced based on role. Trends can be seen, and then they can be used in policy definitions. And then finally, we've got recommendations, which will act as another pair of eyes on policy. So it's going to help optimize policy. It's going to compare with industry trends. It's going to perform behavior analysis, and it's going to identify weaknesses in policy that can be exploited. Okay, and with that, I think we'll pause here for questions, but thank you for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt, for that great presentation. I'm really sorry that the tech gremlins saw you as a juicy target today and decided that you were going to pay, right? No matter what.
There's no animation in that slide, so I feel slightly aggrieved.
That's right. Exactly. This is the right one to end on. All right. So let's get to some questions. We've had a lot of great ones come in today. First up, now the examples you gave were necessarily generic, but are there specific solutions that EPM has been designed to work with?
Well, we do have integrations that we've pre-built for common solutions like SCCM, Intune, ServiceNow, etc. But they're merely time savers. So we make those available in our store that you can download and you can just get going quickly. But we're not limited to those. So any solution that can work with APIs are viable. And if you don't have it, or they don't have a supporting workflow system that we can plug into, then as I mentioned, we've got flows, or you could implement, whichever automation system you've got in place. So if you have an RPA solution, we'd quite happily work with that as well.
Okay, great. Okay, next one. Someone asks, we don't have one source for apps. Can EPM work with multiple software distributors?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's not uncommon. And we built EPM so that it can simultaneously work with any number of software distributors, including ad hoc ones, such as network shares or web URLs. These can be configured as trusted sources as well, because we're keeping a chain of custody of, we've seen an application, where did it come from? These are all viable markers for us to make decisions in policy. And you can build simple policy that, you know what, if this is coming from the Microsoft Store, we're happy with that. We don't want to lose sight of those applications. We still want to be able to catalog them, but we want to build simple policy.
Right, right, absolutely. Okay, next up, Steve wants to know what's the best method to enforce least privilege access, especially for temporary external users, for ones that allow temporary external users.
That's a great question, because it takes a little while to be able to work out what your needs are going to be for a particular role, but you can use previous markers. So we have template policies that you can say, okay, we don't know what you need to be able to, which applications or which privileges you need, but we do know these are the things that we definitely don't want you to do. So you start off with that guardrail policy. But you're in a discovery mode, right? So the first time that contractor connects, we're going to see the things that they did. And you can analyze that afterwards to say, actually, these are the things we definitely don't want you to do again. We didn't think about those, but they're going to go into our restricted tasks. They become new guardrails. But these are the things that you commonly did, and we're okay with that. So we're now going to almost freeze frame that. That's the set of things that we're okay with you doing in future. The next time that consultant connects, we're going to see the differential of things that they did. And we can again track for that before we then start to close this mold down and go, do you know what? That's what we're happy with. If we've got a contractor coming in and connecting to this particular server, this asset, we're going to use this guardrail policy, so that they don't just wander around with full admin rights. I think that's a point I need to clarify. So when EPM is enabling those users, they're never really an admin. Every process that they start is evaluated in policy. And when we're dealing with a brand new user that maybe we've never seen before, we might choose to give them a fairly relaxed policy that they are allowed to do things, but just not too far. And then at the end of that, we're able to almost freeze frame and say, okay, those are the things that you did. We don't envisage you needing any more, so now that is your new policy.
Okay, great. And related to that, then, Jeffrey wants to know, does CyberArk handle shadow IT with local admin accounts that haven't been updated for quite some time? This is a question that sounds like it comes from hard experience.
Yeah, I can relate as well. And it's really apparent when I start a least privilege project with an organization, and they give me the scope of the people that are going to be targeted by this policy, and it's only when we then deploy the agent that we're able to go, hey, do you know that your number of admins is tenfold because of this, and these are all the things that we found. So we can help with the discovery of that. And obviously, we've got templates that almost do a quick rip and replace, where they're not a member of the administrators group, but now they're in this flexible policy that they are allowed to do almost anything apart from these guardrail things, and then we start to close that down. But in the first instance, it will find those shadow admins, the ones that have privileges, whether they're members of that administrator group or not. We can see, actually, they elevated this application. They're not in the admins group. How did they do that? And we're able to trace that back in the process.
Okay, great. All right, we've got time for one more question, and then we'll start wrapping this presentation up. So Linda wants to know, how does zero-touch deployment improve efficiency and reduce deployment time? Quick follow-up to that also. Can you provide examples of industries or use cases where zero-touch IT implementation has been particularly effective? So a two-parter there.
Okay, so let me take the first part. So what are the time benefits? They're difficult to quantify as a broadsheet. Like I said, EPM is one of the least deployed tools, not because it's not effective, but because it's difficult to manage. And any organization that's been, I hesitate to use the word forced, compelled, is that any better? Compelled to implement EPM. They go through this discovery phase where they never really lock it down. They just they collect events upon events upon events, and they leave it in that discovery mode for as long as they can before, they might implement some soft controls. But what largely happens is it doesn't get rolled out everywhere. It stays in the target group, and it never gets off the ground. It becomes shelfware. And our crusade, if you will, is to fix that. So how do we measure success with that? It's the number of customers that we've been able to operationalize with EPM and how quickly they've become efficient in it. As time goes on, we'll see, actually, these are the, as we make improvements to APIs, as we make improvements to AI, we'll definitely see that what those benefits are. But right now, it wouldn't be a fair comparison, because not deployed or poorly deployed versus well deployed is a better metric than speed, if that makes sense. And the other aspect of that question, could you remind me?
Yeah, it was, can you provide examples of industries or use cases where zero-touch IT implementation is particularly effective? Now, I would think it would be in almost every case, but
it is. But the one that springs to mind is manufacturing, because there are an awful lot of commonalities between the machines that are used. But previous methodologies would be that you'd have to learn on each one. You're almost reinventing the wheel. So we're looking at a piece of machinery one, which has got a hugely a very old OS sat there managing that asset. You discover its use cases, you build policy for it, you move on to the next one. That automation to be able to discover, actually, we've got some common trends here, so let's start building these policies up, have meant that, to do work, especially working with automotive and manufacturing, the rollout time is incredibly fast, because the use cases are so small, but that commonality between machines is quite high.
Right. Okay. Great stuff, Matt. Appreciate this so much. I've got the poll question up for people who to let CyberArk know what kind of information you want as a follow-up here. What should they be doing next for you? And with that, Matt, I am going to let you go. Your work here is done. Great presentation. I appreciate your patience through all the tech issues. It just was a lot of fun, and I barely even noticed. So great job today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. And that wraps up the CyberArk portion of this. We are now ready for our first prize drawing of the day. And the winner of the first of three $300 Amazon gift cards is Ali Vafa from Maryland. That is my neck of the woods. Congratulations to you, Ali. We will be in touch about claiming your prize. Okay, now we've got a little bit more audience participation for you now. We are in the process of filling out our 2024 webinar schedule right now. So we'd love to hear from you in the comments, in the questions tab. What technology should we be looking at? What are you most interested in? What do you want to hear more about? We take all of this feedback into account when creating our schedule. So this is your chance to help shape our content for the coming year. Remember, put your suggestions in the questions tab, and you can do this throughout the event today. You don't have to do it just while this slide is up. So please let us know. This is important. We want to make sure we are hitting all the hot areas for you. So let us know, and keep letting us know throughout. And we do appreciate that feedback so much from all of you. And now we are going to get started with our next presentation. This one comes from Scale Computing. Presenting for Scale today are Craig Tiriak and Taylor Like. You can see their titles up here. Craig and Taylor, I want to welcome you to the event today. Are you both on and live?
We are. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I think
All
so.
right. Outstanding. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for what you're about for the knowledge you're about to drop on us. I am going to turn things over to both of you, so take it away.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I'll be kicking it off first, and we're going to be presenting on zero-touch provisioning and orchestration. We're going to do a high-level overview of what scale computing is, what problems we're trying to solve, the problems that you have, and then we'll be doing a quick demo. And so let's get right into it. First of all, zero-touch provisioning, obviously it's kind of a buzzword. Our focus on it today here is with edge computing, which is something we want to define terms important to do with edge computing. And we see it as really anything that is not in your core data center, a traditional enterprise data center, or in the cloud. So that could be a regional data center or a local compute edge, what people might call robo, gateways, all the way down to device edge. So getting further out from the data centers, closer to the people and things that are generating the data, using the applications, and so on. So the further you get from the core data center, you encounter new issues that make zero touch, both provisioning and orchestration and implementation, not just nice to haves, but really must haves. So some of the common drivers that we hear at scale are latency. I can't afford even a couple milliseconds. So think like manufacturing, computer vision, bandwidth constraints. I'm moving terabytes of data. I don't want to do that to these distant locations. Regulations, such as data sovereignty issues or more industry-specific regulations may actually be easier to comply with edge computing. Resiliency, specifically network resiliency. So you got your network going down, maybe you've got your backup network going down. If you have the compute right on-prem, obviously not an issue. And then finally, cost can actually be a driver for edge computing. So the cloud can be really expensive. Sometimes that's due to configuration issues, but also it could be due to you're running legacy workloads that the cost to refactor those to make them work with cloud native technologies may be prohibitive. There are some more examples of those challenges, but these come about when you are running the stuff on-prem. So you've made the decision, I need edge computing to deal with some of those problems that maybe a core data center or cloud setup can't solve, but I still have these issues like there's no IT people on staff. There's a store manager if you're doing a retail setup, production manager in a manufacturing environment, but maybe not a dedicated IT person. There's physical constraints. You don't get some of the advantages of a nice cooling setup, for example, or even maybe a real rack. You may have to make do with the space you got under a shelf. Connectivity and outages obviously do happen and you can't have a workload go down just because your internet's going out for a second. And then, of course, unpredictable demands. So you might know the applications you're running today, but next year could bring an entirely new strategic move that you as the infrastructure team or even a DevOps team perhaps need to support on-prem. So you need to be able to size correctly on-prem. You can't just go to a cloud provider and spin up a new workload when you're in the edge computing space. So in order to solve those problems with your edge computing, you really need infrastructure that cares for itself. So minimal, even zero touches. So you need something that keeps your workloads available. So it's arguably what Scale does best. So we're an HCI provider. So our environment is resilient in multiple ways. So it's resilient in terms of connectivity. So you might have your connectivity go down, but your workloads will stay alive. We're resilient even in the case of hardware failures. So you have, say, a 3-node cluster. One of the nodes has a catastrophic hardware failure, whether that be the drive or what have you. The other 2 nodes can, of course, pick up those workloads automatically. And in most cases, the applications won't even experience disruptions. And so there's also the simplicity of Scale has a famously easy to use interface. Our setup, as Craig is going to demonstrate really soon, is incredibly, incredibly easy. And we continuously push ourselves to increase our lead in that area. Efficiency, you need the edge computing infrastructure. You've got the physical constraints, you've got the environmental constraints. So that means you can't just stuff a huge overspec'd device there. You need something pretty lightweight, something cost effective. And so whatever infrastructure management layer, whether that be for the storage or the virtualization, needs to be really efficient. And finally, flexibility. So as we talked about, you might know your workload needs today, but next year, all of a sudden, you need to implement computer vision. And so now you need more storage, you need more compute. Maybe you need a different type of compute. So having a system that doesn't require you to rip and replace your on-prem installations is really important. And Scale, with the ability to add additional nodes to clusters, supports that infrastructure flexibility even out on the edge. So talking about a little bit how we handle this. This SC platform consists of Scale Computing Hypercore, which is our all-in-one as virtualization. It handles your storage. It handles even snapshotting and replication. So you've got your backup and DR built into it. And then, of course, our famously great support. And on that, you can run the legacy VMs we talked about, but you can also run modern apps. You can run container-based workloads. And what's cool is we have, some NUC form factors pictured here, but Hypercore runs on a huge range of hardware and really can run on any x86-based hardware. So you're not locked into a certain even hardware form factor or vendor. And then with SC Fleet Manager is a cloud-based application. So when you've got hundreds, thousands of sites, even though those sites are set up with Hypercore to run redundantly and resiliently, you also need that management overview layer up in the cloud. And so with that, hopefully I've defined some terms. Hopefully now you understand what problem Scale's trying to solve. And I'm going to hand it off to Craig to give you a quick demo.
Cool. Thanks for that, Taylor. I think you did a good job of really setting the stage here for what we're about to talk about and kind of give context around who Scale Computing is. I want to just level set with one thing, which is, oftentimes when I hear zero touch described, people are really focused on that day zero, day one operations. It's all about how do I get the infrastructure stood up without actually having to send a truck on site or sending, some IT resource on site to deal with it, or even going to, stage applications, that type of thing in an IT infrastructure environment like this. But it really extends beyond that. I think one of the things I'd challenge the audience to do is really think through the entire life cycle of the infrastructure that you have to manage and look for ways to, take as much automation into account as possible to get rid of any manual steps. And that does apply to zero touch provisioning, but it also applies to, not having to send a truck roll in the event of a failure. So let me share my screen here and we're going to walk through a Scale Computing environment. Let's see here. And Taylor, if you could just verify you're able to see my screen share.
Yep, just came through.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as Taylor mentioned, there are really two pieces of the software stack. We have Fleet Manager, which is a cloud-based service that allows you to manage a fleet of Hypercore clusters. And then we have Hypercore itself, which is the software that runs on the physical nodes that are on premises. So I'm pointed to fleet.scaleComputing.com to log into my environment. And the first thing we're going to do is walk through kind of a failure scenario. I've got a NUC-based cluster that happens to be sitting here on my desk. It's called Store 301. I've tried to, for those of you that are in the retail space, try to tailor it to that as a message that I think everyone can understand. You understand what a retail environment looks like. There's no IT personnel on premises. It's likely a store manager that is the one who has the keys to being able to even physically touch the IT infrastructure if anybody on premises does. If I go to the cluster itself, though, this is when I'm transitioning from Fleet Manager into Hypercore. And the Hypercore user interface, again, this is coming off of the nodes itself. I have a secure connection into that through Fleet Manager using what we call Secure Link. And once I log into the system here, you'll see that I've got a handful of applications running on this 3-node system. So across the top here, you see my 3 nodes. I'm going to filter down to just a handful of these for the demonstration here today. Again, retail setting for this particular demo. So I've got a pharmacy application that this site has to run. I've got a point of sale system this site has to run, and a security application the site has to run. And they're kind of a mix between legacy VMs as well as more container based applications or cloud native applications in this environment. And I thought, for the day two operations, as we're talking through zero touch provision, I would show off what it's like to see a node failure in action. So I've pulled one of the nodes out of this cluster here so you can experience this. What is built into HyperCore is, if you're familiar with the term AI Ops, you can think of it as an AI Ops feature that we call AIM. It's Autonomous Infrastructure Management Engine. And what AIM does is really provides intelligence within the cluster itself. And we're think of it as a hierarchical finite state machine that is coming up with a model of what is happening in the environment. Now, it understands what the desired state is of the cluster. You've kind of defined that up front and said, these are the number of nodes that I want in this cluster. Here's how I want them to interoperate. Here are the workloads that I want running in their current state, happens to be running on these. So if I fail a node here, what you're going to notice is that those conditions that we're looking for, such as data redundancy is degraded that just popped up on screen, we have striped and mirrored the data across this entire cluster to be able to protect against a drive failure or a node failure and these types of physical errors that can happen out on the edge of your network, whether that's a single cluster or hundreds of them that you're managing. But this AIM orchestration layer is kind of consuming those conditions and being able to make real-time decisions based on that. So again, the first thing you're going to see is data redundancy is degraded. Very shortly after that, we validate that it's not some sort of temporary networking blip that's prevented this node from communicating, and that it's actually up and running. Once it validates that this node is no longer online, that's when it's going to go through the process of automatically restarting whatever workloads that happens to be these two, the point of sale system, this ADFS workload that I have running on here, that are just automatically going to restart on the other nodes in the system. In the context of zero touch, this means that you no longer have to run out to the site and have somebody quickly spin up workloads. You have high availability built into this, which helps both for those legacy workloads as well as container-based workloads. Now, it's very, we'll say probable that you're not logged into the HyperCore cluster at this exact time to watch a failure happen. So, of course, this AI Ops engine that we have built in called AIM is going to make sure that we're sending out alerts through the UI, as you see here, but we're also sending them out through syslog, we're sending them out through email, and then we propagate all of the alerts that you see here, all these conditions that you see here in the user interface back into Fleet Manager to kind of give you the visibility at scale. Now, what's useful about this is it's interesting, as you're monitoring your infrastructure to see these types of critical alerts pop up. But it only matters in the context of what else is happening within your entire fleet. So if this is a single cluster that you have in your fleet, and this is the only one you care about, that's fine. But if there are other things that might take precedence, this allows you to triage and make sure that you're focusing the time that you need to manually on the things that require your attention. Let the things that are automated take care of themselves, such as the self-healing nature of the cluster that I just demonstrated here. So we take a step back. So that was, you think day two operations, drive failures, node failures, networking issues that can happen on premises with your infrastructure that run the applications there on-prem. Now let's go back and say the original definition of zero touch around provisioning means how do I get my infrastructure deployed? And then how do I get my applications deployed on top of that in an automated fashion? So this is what we internally call zero touch provisioning, which is when you go and stage a new cluster. So I'm going to go and click add cluster. We're going to create store 303. Actually, let me get that on a slide on this, right? So we just looked at store 301, had those three applications running on there. There's another store out here called store 302 that we'll talk about in a second. And we're going to add store 303. And on this site, we're first going to start with setting up the cluster itself, and then we're going to go to deploy applications on top of it. So all I have to do here is, put in the IP address information of the nodes as I expect them to come online, and I select whichever nodes that I have in my environment that I want to be part of this cluster. Now I've got a node that's already showing online here, but if this were your first time, so a matter of operations here, if you placed an order with us, we would image nodes throughout our integration factory. We would harvest whatever information we need about those nodes to associate them with the organization that's going to be created on your behalf, the Fleet Manager. That way, when you log in, all the information about the nodes that you care about are already pre-populated, and all you have to do is select them. Now, this one's online because I actually have it plugged in, sitting in my lab environment. But if these were not online, you could select whatever nodes you wanted to, put in the IP addresses of them, and it would sit out there in a staged environment until you were actually running, you plugged in the power and plugged in networking on that device. Let's see here. And then notice that things such as a software license, I don't have to like go and look in a box. I don't have to go look at an email. We pre-populate all that information for you as well. And then all I have to do is create the cluster. So imagine in the background now, again, we'll go back to this retail environment. So I've shipped my infrastructure to an associate at the store who plugs in power and plugs in networking. This comes online, securely reaches out to Fleet Manager and says, I'm online and ready to get a configuration file if you have one for me. So you notice that one was already online, but it didn't have a configuration file staged yet. Once I hit staged and set that information, it is securely going to send that down to the nodes itself, and it's automatically going to start applying that to the cluster. So this process takes somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on how many nodes you have in your environment you're going to be setting up. It's, again, hands-off. I didn't have to run out there to do this myself. I didn't have to send expensive IT resources on premises to do that, nor did I have to stage that at a staging facility. Now, I know that there are other reasons that people enjoy staging, and that's fine. We also have support for one-touch provisioning, which allows you to put the same configuration file on a USB and plug that in the back of the nodes if you already have an integration process that's set up around that. But assuming you can streamline things and send them straight to the store, or straight to the site, this is exactly how that process would look. Once this site is up and running, it's going to look a lot like Store 302. So Store 302, it's got its IP address. It's a single node system. I'm going to go into this cluster, and you'll see that there's actually nothing running on this particular site right now. And this is the final state of once zero touch is up. We say, all right, day zero operations are done. We've got the nodes physically installed. They're able to communicate with Fleet Manager. I have initialized the cluster, so it's stood up and ready to bring on applications. Now let's go on to more day one operations, where it's time to bring on the exact applications that I want in this environment. So those applications are going to look like this. So first, I've got this is a blank, vanilla cluster that has been stood up that has a name to it, but I need to go and create a user. I need to create, say, a snapshot schedule. Taylor had mentioned some of the more advanced DR and backup functionality we have built into HyperCore. This is some of the things you can automate. You want to set up maybe a template VM that you want to use as a starting point to derive additional workloads off of that. And then we actually, if those of you that are familiar with Cloud Init, we have the ability to programmatically define, here's what I want these workloads to do once they come online. And we send through the metadata and user data so that it can go out and set itself up even within the guest. We do this with a Red Hat certified Ansible collection. And I'll show you exactly how that site will work here by pulling up my Ansible environment. 1 second here. So this is 243. So here I'm logged into the single node system. I've got my Ansible playbook here ready to roll. And you'll see that much like Store 301 that had these demo workloads running, we're going to get that to the same state here on the single node system. And the first thing it's going to do is go through and it's going to use the automated, basically use this collection to define everything that we have in this this file. So it's going to go through and create an end user. It's going to, looks like I'm, so where's my terminal stopped on it? Give me 1 second here. There we go. So it's going to go through and create this user. It's going to create that schedule. It's going to import a template VM if it doesn't already exist, and then it's going to take that template VM and use Cloud Init to go and define the pharmacy application, the point of sales application, security application. And again, this process is really dependent on all sorts of things. Network speed, for one, it's going to depend on how many workloads you're wanting to bring on, whether it's a Windows-based workload or, here I'm using Ubuntu or whatever, Debian instance, whatever the underlying operating system is, you can pull that in, define what you need to, and have that automatically deployed so you don't physically have to do this. Of course, I can point and click and add these VMs, and as Taylor mentioned, we're famously known for our simplicity in the user interface, but we try to extend that through the API and through tools that allow you to interact with the infrastructure as code, such as Ansible. So with that, I'll let this run in the background. I think it probably makes sense, kind of just sum up, and then we'll go into questions if there are any right now. But in summary here, as this is running, I'll just say, the scale computing platform in general, whether you're looking at us or others, really look at zero touch provisioning through the lens of the entire infrastructure lifecycle, not just that initial deployment, but what happens once these are out in the field. And then, in terms of scale computing specifically, we kind of have the check boxes around being able to simply set up infrastructure without having to, have IT expertise on premises. Once it's set up, you can bring the applications on, knowing that they're going to be highly available, knowing that you don't have to worry about failures in the infrastructure. And then when additional changes come out, we have new features, new bug fixes, critical fixes you need to get out in the field. You have the ability to apply rolling updates through your fleet as well. All right, we'll go back to the slides here now that that's completed. Any questions that have come in that we can answer?
Hi, guys. Yeah, absolutely. Some great questions. I wanted to thank you for that presentation. I love demos and always have, really engaging on that. And thanks for showing us what scale can do. What I wanted to do while we're looking at questions first is put up a, hold on here for a second. Okay. Can you do me a favor and stop the screen share?
Oh, sorry about that. Absolutely.
There you go. All right. Outstanding. Thanks. No problem at all. So what I'm going to do first, while we're looking at questions, is I'm going to put up a poll. More audience participation here. We've got a couple of polls, so we're gonna do them while we're doing the questions. So here's the first poll for feedback from the audience. What is the primary reason that interests you in adopting zero-touch provisioning for your cluster deployment? So while we are seeing what folks are, how they're responding to that, let's get to some of the questions here. All right, let me call those up. So here's a good one. How does zero-touch provisioning with Scale Computing Fleet Manager differ from traditional manual cluster deployment methods? And what specific benefits does it offer in terms of efficiency and standardization? Wow, that's a big one.
That is a big one. Yeah. I mean, just think through all the processes you have to go through in a manual configuration of infrastructure. Oftentimes you have to plug in, first of all, think of it physically, you have to plug in a keyboard, video, and mouse oftentimes to even access the console initially. And then you're applying IP addresses. And, if it's a clustered environment, you're basically making sure the networking is all set up correctly. And then you might have to run some pre-staged checks to make sure everything's up and running. And then you click go, and that process can take a bit. And then once everything is up and operationalized, then you have to go and bring the workload deployments on top of that. If that is not automated, basically every step along that entire journey really allows you to make mistakes. So it's, there are people fat finger things all the time, and if you're doing things in an automated fashion, it's way less likely that that's going to happen. You get less configuration inconsistencies with, if you're doing multiple devices, and definitely less likely to have potential for human error along the way. I would say, honestly, in the customers that I've talked to that have used zero-touch provisioning, the things that they state are, part of it is, yes, they are able to get around those configuration inconsistencies, but they're also spending their time on things that are adding more value to them and to their organization, and that is always a win. I would also say that not having to send IT resources on premises is kind of a big deal. I mean, when you think about, if you've got even one site, sending IT resources on site isn't a big deal if you live nearby and you're the IT resource. But if you've got tens or hundreds of sites, every time you have to roll a truck, it gets to be pretty expensive. And so anything you can do to prevent that is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of pricing, I'm going to put the next poll question up, and then we'll ask the next question, which has to do with pricing. So here's the second poll question. What is the most appealing aspect of zero-touch provisioning with Scale Computing Fleet Manager for your IT team? So let us know. Give us some great feedback on that while we ask the next question. So Justin wants to know, how scalable is the Scale solution, and how is pricing determined?
Yeah, so Scale is pun intended, I'm sure, on the question there. But the any individual cluster, you can start as low as a single node system and go all the way up to around 8 nodes within an individual cluster. It's very common that we have customers that will deploy multiple clusters even at a single site to make use of backup and DR functionality that's built in. And then of course the cluster environments are all managed through the single pane of glass of Fleet Manager, and so that becomes, lines get a little blurry when you start thinking of individual clusters when you're managing a fleet where you don't necessarily care where the applications are running, as long as you're meeting the SLA on latency, meeting the SLA on throughput, and kind of the other attributes that a customer might care about, so that the performance is there for their applications, and whether it's a human or whether that's a machine interacting with that. And so I think adding that layer on top of it somewhat negates the need to even answer the how many nodes in a single cluster question. Pricing wise, we price this in a couple different ways. Hypercore has its licensing that is usually based on core count. But we also have, for like larger distributed enterprises and MSPs, we also have what we call a site license that covers every core within a cluster. And then separately from that, we have Fleet Manager, which is licensed based on the number of sites under management.
Okay, terrific. That pretty much wraps up our time on the Q&A part. I do have one more final question for either or both of you, though. So Craig and Taylor, if someone wants to get started with scale computing or find out more, what do you recommend is the next step that they should take?
I would usually recommend people just go to scalecomputing.com. There's a demo that you can sign up for there pretty easily. And I think we also have some handouts here that we've included as part of the handout section in the EcoCast that are worth perusing as well. But a live demo where you can ask your one-on-one questions, I think, brings a lot of clarity to what the solution can do in your environment.
Great. All right. Excuse me, gentlemen, I think that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for the great presentation, for your insights in the Q&A, for the demo, and all of that. It was really illuminating and a lot of fun to have you on. So thank you.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, we are now starting to wrap up our event. We do have one more important piece of business here, and that is the next two $300 Amazon gift cards. We got to give those away now. So we have got the winners selected, as I mentioned before. You do have to be present for the entire event to be eligible for the prizes. And our final two prize winners for today are Anthony. This is going to be a fun one to say. Cantarciego from California. I hope I said that right. And Paul Matos from Massachusetts. Congratulations to both of you. We will be in touch with you really soon about claiming those prizes. One more thing I wanted to point out also as a follow-up is that we do have handouts from both of our vendors today. Make sure you're checking out the handouts section, as we talked about in the beginning, and download those valuable handouts from that from the presentation today too. All right. And if you liked what you heard, if you liked what you saw today, maybe you'd like us to do the same kind of an event for your company. If that is the case and you want us to come up with something for you, we've got lots of options. We can do custom events. We can fit you in a larger event, however you want to do it. If that seems like something you'd be interested in, let us know. You see the email up there, connect@actualtechmedia.com. We will follow up right with you and hopefully build something that works for you. So next thing, and almost the last thing on the agenda here, we've got another event tomorrow that looks really interesting, the kind of thing we haven't done too much of, but it looks like it's going to be quite intriguing. So this is an EcoCast that starts at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time, of course, and it's Cloud for Broadcasting, Understanding Methods for Securing Media Assets. Again, this is happening tomorrow. So if you're interested, sign up right away and join us at noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific for what promises to be a really fascinating EcoCast. I am really looking forward to that. In fact, I'm going to be moderating that as well. So maybe you'll want to join me again tomorrow. And that is a wrap for us. Whoops, sorry, I hit the button too early. I've got my own tech gremlins here to deal with today. It wasn't just you, Matt. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, we're done. So I want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together just fabulous presentations, demos, for the Q&A insights. I want to thank all of our participants for making this event possible. That includes CyberArk and Scale Computing. And finally, last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for being on today, for joining us, for your comments, for saying hi, and just for spending part of your day with us. It's always a pleasure. We do this for you, and it was great to see you. I hope we'll see you again tomorrow and at future events. That ends today's event. Have a great rest of your day. And now I will bring up the right slide. Have a great one, everyone.